All right, everyone, we can finally get started. Daven is here. So this is Daven Ghandi. I briefly told him a little bit about you, Daven. Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Daven Ghandi. I am an immigration attorney here in New York, and my passion is doing asylum law. And so, to me, with the situation that's going on in Afghanistan right now, and just receiving a lot of distressed clients and people who are trying to flee Afghanistan, Sumaya and I figured that it would be an important discussion to have, as we also try and grapple with what's going on, but at the same time. Also trying to figure out how we as immigration lawyers can actually help. So thank you, Sumaya, for putting this together and for inviting me to come speak with you.
Yeah, so I mean, as you were saying, this is really, really important, and we were kind of talking about this before. In the last week or so, last 2 weeks, I have been getting a lot of emails and phone calls, and I'm sure you have been as well, not just from people here, but actually a lot of people from Afghanistan asking about applying for asylum and how can they apply, what can they do to leave Afghanistan and seek refuge or come to the United States. And one of the things I realized is that a lot of people aren't aware about the differences, between applying to be a refugee and applying for asylum. So what I thought, and we also had a lot of people asking what they can do for their family members. Some people had visa applications for family members that were approved, and now they don't know what's going to happen with that. So they're deeply concerned, and I'm sure you've been getting similar requests, Daven.
Yeah, definitely. And with everything that's going on right now, it's very hard to say that a lot of times there just really isn't one direct path. There is no magic wand that we can wave around that would just help make their problems disappear and have them be here and be safe. So we are kind of just fighting and working with what we have and what the laws currently provide.
Right. And the situation is developing, right? So we have to work within the law. We have to work with the current circumstances and see what develops over the next few weeks. So I thought what we could first do is explain the difference between filing for asylum and filing to be a refugee, right? The differences, primary differences between those two. We're not going to go into a very in-depth discussion of the law itself. We have resources available on our website, etc., whatnot, and you can reach out to us to learn more about the specific processes, but this will just give you an idea of where you can search and the key requirements that you have to look out for. And then I thought we would go into just, how we can help or what is available to people who are in the United States versus people who are outside the U.S. in Afghanistan, and then resources that are available to Afghan citizens and also their family members here and other people who want to help. Perfect. So let's start with asylum and refugee. So asylum and refugee, these are granted to people who have been persecuted or they fear they're going to be persecuted on account of their race, religion, political opinion, belonging to a social group or nationality. And both are similar in that regard. But there's a key difference between the two. For asylum, you have to be in the United States in order to file for asylum. In contrast, to file to be a refugee, you have to be outside of the United States. It's something that's done when you are not in the U.S. So for those who've been emailing me asking, how can you file for asylum? Unfortunately, you have to first be here in the United States or port of entry and request asylum at that moment.
Right. So within the refugee program as well, it's classified under 3 priority groups. Priority 1, Priority 2, Priority 3. The first priority are for individuals that are referred to by U.S. embassies or referred to by UNHCR, which is the United Nations. Can't remember the top of my head what's the full name. Oh, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees.
Yes.
And the second priority group are groups that are of special humanitarian concern, and these are identified by U.S. refugee programs. Now, the third priority group is what's known as family reunification cases, and these are immediate family members of asylees or refugees that are already in the United States. Now, the problem with the refugee resettlement process is, so a few weeks ago, on August 2nd, they made it P2 that allows Afghan nationals to be considered for refugee resettlement.
Yeah.
The issue is there is no process that's set up. And the reality is any referrals take a long time to process. So there is no clear directives.
That one of the key differences is that you have to be referred by somebody, right? And
Right.
process. So in general, let's say if it's not a circumstance like Afghanistan, in general, how difficult is it to be referred to this program and to come here as a refugee? And then comparing that to the actual situation in Afghanistan, where it's completely chaotic, people don't have access to any resources, people are afraid to even like leave their homes, right? They can't get to checkpoints, they can't get to airports, they can't really go anywhere. So how difficult is it, and what is the likelihood of somebody being able to successfully pursue this?
So the likelihood right now is almost close to nil because they aren't able to process these claims in Afghanistan. So this will require them actually being able to go to a third country and then possibly requesting a P2 refugee resettlement from those countries.
Right. So right now, this may not be a viable option for someone, or it may be a difficult option, but I mean, we don't know again, right? Depending on how the situation goes, possibly over the next few weeks or months, they can pursue this. We can set up some systems that make it easier or allow people access to this, you know, to actually do this. So that is an option that's available to people, just that they may not be able to access it right now. And the key difference that people can know about now is that that's different from asylum. So asylum is you actually have to be here and then you can apply for asylum. So you mentioned something earlier, Daven, which is that there may be already Afghan citizens here who are currently on visitor visas, right? Mm-hmm. So given the situation in Afghanistan, definitely they should not go back. Sure. So one of the key requirements of asylum is that you have to file within 1 year of your entry. So if you're here and due to this circumstance, 100% we recommend that you file for asylum. The other thing is some people, Afghans who may be here without status, you may now be eligible for asylum if you fall, of course, within these 5 protected grounds, right? And given the change in country conditions, like the severe change in country conditions that has taken place in Afghanistan. So if asylum wasn't an option for people before, like this is a good time to pursue that option.
Sure. And then just to kind of add on it as well, people who already have removal orders, so people who have possibly gone to court and received the removal order because they didn't have a very strong case before, or they just didn't have any relief options available. Now they can file to reopen their case based on the new changes in country condition, right, and to then apply for asylum.
Yeah.
So that's an option as well.
Yeah, and that's very important for people to know. And thank you for bringing that up, because there are some people who previously, you know, weren't eligible. Their cases were closed before the immigration court, and now this is an option available for them. The key thing here is that the options are limited when you're in Afghanistan. But it seems like if you can get people, if people can somehow manage to leave Afghanistan, go to a third country, they can request something called humanitarian parole. So there are certain countries, and we've actually had a lot of great immigration organizations, including ALA, put together some resources. So currently, Afghan citizens, they can get e-visas to these following countries: Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan. And here are the following countries where they can enter without a visa. And this includes Antigua and Barbuda, Benin, Cape Verde, Comoros, Dominica, Ethiopia, Maldives, and Qatar. And you can either request humanitarian parole with USCIS or CBP, which is Customs and Border Protection. So, of course, even though this is something that's available, how do we get people out of Afghanistan? How do we get them to go to a third country?
Right, and that's the exact problem right now. I mean, a lot has changed even in this last week. You know, we've all seen the news. We've all seen the situation. It's extremely dire right now. Yesterday, I believe it was yesterday or last night, the Taliban announced that they are not allowing any Afghans to leave Afghanistan. So then what? And, you know, according to reports from our colleagues, people are saying that people are dying, people are being tear gassed, people are being beaten, shot, killed, all outside of the airport. So the only actual safe place in Afghanistan right now is within the perimeters of the airport where there are US citizens there. And with the evacuation efforts going on, once again, evacuation efforts right now are focused towards getting, first of all, US citizens out of Afghanistan. A lot of times, also, Afghanistan, so the Taliban have also taken control of the communication towers at the airport and the surrounding areas. So people are being told to go back and wait for a communication from the United States, but there is no actual means of communicating with them.
Right.
To let them know that, yeah, it's safe. You guys are selected. You guys can now evacuate with this. And then there's the other problem of having August 31st as the deadline to retreat and to leave Afghanistan. That's the unofficial deadline, but they're saying that within the next 36 hours, they're going to shut down evacuation efforts. So we are now dealing with hundreds of thousands of people just being afraid and not having any means to leave their homes because there are so many checkpoints towards these borders, towards the airports. So, yeah, I mean, it's a question that I really do not have the answer to right now. How do people get out of Afghanistan?
Yeah. It's a very, very frustrating situation with limited information and limited resources. The other thing is there are people, right? So we have this deadline where they're trying to get Americans out. And then we have this other situation in addition to Americans in Afghanistan. And then let's say Afghanis who are US citizens or green card holders. And then there are people whose family members may have petitioned for them and they have immigrant visas, right? They're also there, but there's no way for them to get out.
That being said, 80,000 people have already been evacuated. Still, it's just not enough.
Yeah. So the question is, what resource do these people have? Is there any hope for these people? From what I understand, and let me know if you have additional information, there's a list that's being put together for people who have approved immigrant visas, where they can sign up and provide information about what type of visa, etc., some relevant information. And we'll provide this information after this discussion to get on this list so that they can try to leave the United States. There are efforts in place. But beyond that, what is the likelihood of actually getting people out of Afghanistan?
Right now?
Yeah.
I don't know the answer to that. I don't know the answer whether people are able to leave right now. The hope is that hopefully things will calm down in a few months so that the U.S. Embassy could perhaps, resume services, because the U.S. Embassy in Kabul has already shut down. So there is nobody in the consular offices to process cases, and what limited staff they had were moved to the airport, and so that's what they are doing right now. But once the U.S. takes everyone out, there's not going to be anybody left to process cases in Afghanistan. So then, honestly, I think when the situation calls for it, I would say you got to do what you got to do to survive. And if that involves you just, going into your neighboring countries, however you do it, and then figure out what vehicles of immigration would allow you to.
Yeah, and how do you do that?
How do you do that? Yeah. I mean, again, yeah. I don't know.
And how do you do, I can't even talk. How do you do that? People are afraid to leave their homes. There are men walking around with guns. It's not New York. It's not the United States where you can, put together some plans, get a car and leave. This is Afghanistan that we're talking about.
Right.
What I do want to share is that it seems like there is an Afghanistan task force that is putting together, and will provide the email address, the contact information for any U.S. citizens, green card holders, people who currently have valid visas to the U.S. or who have pending visa applications, to get on this list, and they're going to try to figure out how to bring them over here. Additionally, there is a repatriation assistance request with the U.S. Embassy. So we'll provide the link for where this form can be filled out so people can put this information together. The one thing that was highlighted is that you can add your family members, but unfortunately, if they don't have visas or they don't have pending applications, they can't be included. So this is, I think, one concrete effort in place to address those situations where people do have actual visas or they're U.S. citizens, green card holders, or pending applications. The question just is, how is this going to be implemented? But at least this effort is being made. And I believe, so there was right before they left, right, there was a special visa for Afghans who assisted the U.S. in certain, like I think media agencies, et cetera, whatnot. And visa was created for them, a special immigrant visa for them. What is the situation with that?
Sure. So the special immigrant visa that's created for AfghaNs, and it's basically a visa that would allow the thousands and thousands of Afghans who had helped out doing, be it translation work, mapping the geographical area of Afghanistan for the Americans over the past 2 decades, granting some sort of relief for them to be able to get a green card and come here so that they are able to be safe from persecution by the Taliban. And these are the people right now that are most fearful for their lives, because it's shown that the Taliban are seeking revenge over those who have cooperated with the U.S. forces. So this program was created. There are 2 categories for the SIV visas, and one is for Afghan translators, and the other is for anyone that's been employed by the U.S. in Afghanistan within the military. And the problem with that is, one, the requirements. It takes, right before, I guess just a few weeks ago, there is 15 steps that they have to take in order to get the visa process. So there is already a backlog of thousands of cases, right? And then the amount of time it takes to get these visas processed. So a lot of people are in line, but they just never got the approval. Or they got the approval and they had to do a medical exam. So up until recently, and I think a few weeks ago, they even reduced the requirements. So from 15 now, they made it to 4 steps that's needed. And then from 2 years of service to the United States, it's now 1 year of service with the United States. So they made it a little bit easier, but at the same time, 2 problems here. There is no embassy to process these cases now in Kabul or in Afghanistan. And second, so there is no embassy, and what was the other one? Yeah, there is no embassy.
Do you remember? Yeah.
If I remember, I'll let you know.
Embassy. So what I don't understand is, why didn't we put some measures in place? Why didn't we reduce these requirements before, right? Before the U.S. decided to leave, because this happened very, very fast. It seems like we should have put in special emphasis on getting these people out of there if we knew we were going to leave, because these are the people who risked their lives to help the U.S., right? They put their lives and that of their families in danger. So in return, we should have made sure that they were protected, and we should have reduced the requirements and had them brought in earlier. And now these people who risk their lives, they're there. So it's not just them, it's their families, children, women that we're talking about. And if this process takes several months, now there's no embassy, what is the likelihood of them like getting this visa? And forget getting the visa, are they even going to be alive to get this when this becomes eligible? Like, you know, when the embassy opens up, if it opens up?
Sumaya, and I think that really speaks to why I'm so frustrated, right?
Yeah.
Right before I go into that, you know, the 2 issues right now is, 1, there is no embassy, and 2, it's almost impossible to get these documents to prove that they have actually helped and worked for the United States. So they are left with no resources. And the other thing is, you know, when you're talking about what can people do in Afghanistan right now, even having documents that show that you work for the U.S. could make them vulnerable. So people are telling them, wipe your phones, clear everything that shows any evidence that you were tied to the United States if you want to be safe. Because if you get stopped at the checkpoint and you get found with links to the United States, you could be killed, right? And then the problem is, when we're talking about with the question you just asked me, it's so frustrating because this war has cost more than $2 trillion, more than 240,000 lives. And after 20 years, what do you have to show for it, right?
Yeah.
And thousands of Afghanistans had risked their lives helping the United States. And now when the US is focusing its evacuation efforts, I think it should ask itself, what do they owe these Afghani people who have put their lives on the lines for us, right?
A big question that so many of us are asking, because this situation has shocked all of us, right? We did spend 20 years there. What was the purpose of it? And shouldn't we have left with a plan? I mean, we all have our thoughts on this.
Right.
And I do think that a huge disservice, forget disservice, like we've literally put these people's lives in danger, not just the lives of the people who've helped Americans, but the Afghans living there now under the Taliban. And, the other thing, David, that I was thinking about, you bring up a good point. So people who have helped the United States, right, or let's say other people who may be eligible for asylum, if they can get themselves outside of there, or who may be eligible for humanitarian parole, they have to delete or get rid of all this evidence that would then make them eligible for that. Because if they keep that in their home, let's say somebody comes in from the Taliban and they find that, their life will be in danger. So then let's say at some point they are eventually able to leave. What evidence do they have? You know?
Yeah, because a lot of times, even in immigration court right now, outside of the Afghanistan context, we are struggling with, when people are fleeing for their lives, they don't think about, oh, let me grab this as an evidence of my persecution, right? When now they are forced to delete or destroy the evidence that they already have, now what do they have to show later on when they are applying for asylum, right? I guess thankfully, even within asylum laws, your declaration itself can be sufficient sometimes to win a case. But you're right. When you're applying for paroles or even visas, you need documents to show that you either qualify for whatever you're applying for. And that's an issue there. Now, the other issue with humanitarian parole is it costs money. I think it's about $560 or $70 per application per person. So it also is favored towards the rich, right? So people who can't afford it, they are just kind of stuck.
It's an excellent point. What resources do people have to file for these applications? And I think we have another attorney in our audience who works for CARE is saying us that people are burning their documents out of fear. And that's 100% true. Not just documents for asylum, but also you need documents like birth certificates, marriage certificates, passports. Where can you get a passport right now? For a lot of these things, you need an actual passport to leave the country. So what do people have to prove their identities, to prove that they're eligible for asylum? It's really putting these Afghani people in a critical situation. They're almost like cornered, right? They leave Afghanistan. What are the recourse? What is the recourse available to them? It looks very bleak to me. The other thing is somebody asked, is there TPS for asylum? For Afghanistan. Currently, there is no TPS for Afghanistan. It's possible the U.S. may come up with that, but usually TPS is reserved for some, well, I think this should qualify, right? Some big natural disasters, civil wars, etc., whatnot. So I think there is a likelihood of TPS coming out for Afghanistan, but right now there isn't. And again, we fall into the same problem. Let's say there is. How are people going for TPS? You need to establish nationality, right? That's a very key, important part of that. If people don't have these documents and they're burning their documents and there are no embassies or institutions where they can get these documents, how will they prove these things? Right. Yeah, so we're looking at a very dire situation currently. I don't want to be like all bleak and say there's no hope. I'm just saying that this is the circumstance right now and it needs to be addressed, and we need to think of some ways to provide avenues for people in Afghanistan to seek refuge in the US and other countries and be able to legitimately get some sort of status in another country. Should we talk about the options available to Afghans here in the US?
Sure.
talk a little bit more about Afghanistan, the citizens in Afghanistan. I think
Sure.
we can to options available for Afghanistan.
Right. So obviously the first thing would be asylum, and we've kind of already discussed asylum as a immigration option for a lot of Afghanistan that are currently here, because there is a fear of persecution if they do return to their country. And with asylum, you also have to show that your country is unable or unwilling to help you, your government. And in this case, there is really no government in Afghanistan right now. So it's definitely a very, very strong option for Afghanistan's for people from Afghanistan who are here in the United States. So if you do have family members who can petition for you, and you're already here in the United States, or if you're in another country, you can get that started. So doing filing a family petition. Now, again, with this situation that's going on,
yeah, you start the petition,
right?
Right.
So, for example, a sibling petition. If you're petitioning for your brother, it might take up to 13 years to get that the application.
Days from now,
because of all the backlog that's in the system right now. I think I'm frozen. So what can you do? So if you're abroad and you have somebody here who can petition for you, the good thing is that when you apply for parole, you can use that as a reason of requesting parole. And when you're already here in the United States, parole is usually given for a year. So what you can do is just file extensions every year until the priority date is current and until you can actually adjust your status in the United States. So that's actually an option that's available. People can always request extensions of whatever status they are in. And because it's an extenuating circumstance, it wouldn't be that hard to get it done.
Right.
I also...
Go ahead, yeah.
Now, I also do want to point that I know we were talking about paroles, but currently, if somebody who is able to get on a plane and be evacuated from Afghanistan, and they're able to get to the United States, even if they don't have an actual status already, like they don't have a green card or permanent resident status, they are automatically being paroled into the United States. So that's something that the U.S. Department of State has done that helps these people who are able to get on the planes and get here. It's automatic parole. That's
good, right? That's something good to know about. And then once they come here, they can, of course, seek asylum, right? The other thing is, as we were talking about a little bit earlier, I do think we may see TPS for Afghanistan being issued. I mean, if we don't, I'll be very, very surprised by it. So I think there's a possibility of that. And if TPS does come about, and I mean, the way to look at it is, if the situation doesn't change in Afghanistan, it doesn't get better, there's a possibility of it getting renewed. Hopefully things get better, but I don't know what the likelihood of that is. So that's another option that's available to people. And the good thing to know is a lot of these immigration options, you don't have to just pick one, right? You can be eligible for more than one. So you can apply for both asylum and TPS.
Sure.
Have family members also petition for you as well. If you are a U.S. citizen or green card holder, you can petition for your spouses, your children.
Sure. There's also VAWA, which is the Violence of Women Act. So if you can show that you were married to a U.S. citizen or a green card holder and you've suffered abuse within that relationship, you could possibly potentially qualify for an immigration relief as well. So I say, go through all, meet with an immigration lawyer, go through have a consultation with them to discuss your specific case and then decide from there. I mean, there's also special immigrant juvenile status, and these are for children who are minors who are here in the United States who have been either abandoned, abused, or neglected by one or both parents. Death is considered abandonment. So if one of their parents have been killed in Afghanistan and a 16-year-old kid finds himself here alone, he could potentially adjust status based on getting a special immigrant juvenile status. So I do think there are plenty of options. Unfortunately, I think right now these options are available to people who are already outside of Afghanistan, who are already in the United States.
Yes. So that's the thing, right? These are options for people who are in the U.S., but at least these are some options that are available to them. So for people who are here, who are U.S. citizens and green card holders and who have family members in Afghanistan, right now, yes, the embassies are closed and some of these applications take a long time, right? Sibling petitions take a really long time. Spouse petitions can, I mean, immediate relative is different, but they can take up to 2 years. It depends. However, I do think it is still worth it to apply if you are eligible to apply for someone and just get the process rolling, because rather than wait for things to get better, if you get it done now, then let's say 6-7 months from now, you haven't let these 6 months, I don't want to say go to waste, but at least like this time has been spent with an application being in process. So it is worth pursuing. And I mean, what do you think, Daven? I don't know what the situation is going to be with the Taliban. I've heard, you know, news reports about China wanting to have business relations with them. This Taliban trying to make more of an effort. They want to try to be like legitimate, right? So do you think we're going to have an actual legitimate Taliban government? Like the embassy will open up, they'll try to work with the U.S.? Or what are your thoughts on this?
I mean, it will. If it does form a government, it'll be a government that would not be recognized by the international community. So, I do not think that's going to be possible. So, yeah.
Yeah. So, do we have some positive news for people? Positive.
It's hard to say. I mean, like I said, it's a developing story. You know. It's a situation that it's very volatile right now, and we really don't know what's going to happen. Taliban themselves have said that, you know, we are not like before, we are new, but what they've done, they've beheaded people already. You know, I think 14 people were beheaded just, I think, recently. So it's going to be a repeat of what has happened in the past. So I don't really see any big changes. I don't think that women will still have their freedom. I don't think that they will be able to work. I think things are going back to how it was before. And women and children, unfortunately, are the most vulnerable population right now, and they need to get out. But then at the same time, are we just going to get women and children out? What about their brothers, and what about their family and their fathers? So,
of course. You can't just selectively choose women and children, but women and children are very vulnerable, right? Given the past history of the Taliban. I do have to say, like, as soon as I heard the news about the, you know, we saw them, right, slowly taking over. And then as soon as I heard that the president had fled and Kabul was under the Taliban, I don't know about you, but it was a very emotional and scary experience for me. It's like, I remember the way I felt back in like 2011, and it's a very scary situation, especially as a woman, right? I really feel for the Afghani people. And I've seen some news articles about the first female mayor, right, fearing for her life. In the last few years, we've seen a lot of people make progress in Afghanistan, a lot of women entering the public arena, starting their businesses. I have, you know, I really feel I have these clients who started an organization in Afghanistan, nonprofit, to help widows and orphans, and I immediately thought of them, and I thought, you know, they do all this great work. What's going to happen to the work of that organization? And no one's going to be there to help these people. And what about other nonprofit organizations that are there? What is their fate too, right? Going back to what's the fate of people who dare to help, right? Or to be more independent, to assist women. I don't know. It's a very difficult situation.
Right.
So having said that, there are a number of organizations that are providing certain types of assistance. So we've also been getting requests from people on how they can help, right? So this is a situation in which people need legal information, need legal help with immigration, etc., other things. Some people want to know where they can donate, and then other people want to know how they can actively volunteer to assist with some of these movements to get people out of there. So there are a couple organizations, and again, we'll provide this information, but some of the organizations that you can look up who provide a list of include CARE, International Refugee Assistance Project, they have a list of 20 organizations can donate to, which is great. So they're reliable organizations. There's also Women for Afghan Women, the International Rescue Committee, and a couple others. So it's, if you're looking to help, I think there are a lot of organizations out there that have kind of rallied and put together resources to see what they can do. And it is worth reaching out to them and checking out their websites to see what options are available for you to help, donate, or provide legal assistance if there are any attorneys here who want to do that.
Yeah, also people can text resist to 50409. Again, it's resist at 50409. What it does is the text will identify your representatives and help write letters to them. So that's also one way that you can get involved.
Yeah, that's great. So where do we leave people with right now? What do we leave people with right now, Daven? We've shared all these options, immigration options that are available for them if they're here in the U.S., the limited options if they're in Afghanistan. The key point is somehow they have to get out of Afghanistan. So what do we want to leave them with?
Well, I also just want to kind of speak about a little bit longer about how people can help. And that is to volunteer your services to welcome new refugees into the United States. Yeah. These are people who are fleeing persecution, who have just gone through probably the worst things that could happen to anyone's lives. And so they need as much help as possible because all they could have on their bags are just clothes, right? So help in financial donations, help with food, personal items, care, helps set up their homes. So when they are placed in homes, help maybe even provide a home, help transport them to the hospital to get their medical services. So these are there are many ways to help. And as lawyers, maybe take on 1 or 2 pro bono cases. I know it could be hard sometimes, especially when we're dealing with our own livelihood, but they need it.
I think this is a very important point, Daven. This is a time when it's not just we are Americans, they are Afghans, or these, we separate ourselves from other people based on nationality. It's a time when we identify as humans, right? Where we connect with what's going on. I do a lot of asylum, and I know you do as well. And one of the things that gets really highlighted in the asylum cases is the trauma that people undergo, right? The fear that they have when they live in these countries where they're facing persecution or they have a fear of future persecution. It's not always a tangible thing, right? Somebody who doesn't experience it cannot necessarily understand it. But it's a severe thing. So I'm just trying to imagine myself, like, I can't, I can only imagine living there with this fear, the situation that happened. It takes a toll on people. And you see this in asylum cases. People are very, very afraid. They've survived these traumatic experiences and they don't even know how to articulate it, right? And it takes years and years to process.
Yeah. I always remember this quote by Warsan Shah, who is a British Somali poet, and it goes, "Nobody puts their children on a boat unless the water is safer than land." And that, to me, really encapsulates the whole refugee experience, because a lot of times these people would like to stay in the place that they were born, right?
Yeah.
But because of the circumstance of what's happening to war, they are forced to flee, and then they go into the water, which could be even more dangerous. So, compassion, I guess.
Important to highlight for people because I know, in the last few years, and there are some people around the world, right, where like refugees weren't welcomed, or people weren't that receptive to them. And that's exactly it, Daven. People have lives, they have families, they have homes, jobs, etc. What leads somebody to give all of that up and go into this unknown country? And the way to get there, sometimes they undergo these like tumultuous journeys. They go to 3-4 different countries, they cross the ocean, they come through the border, and they do it with little kids, right? Little kids, So what leads them to do that? It's because the situation is so awful back home, so dangerous that they're willing to risk and give up all of that to go seek refuge somewhere else just so they have the chance of living and surviving. And I think that's very, very important for us to share with people. That's the key. That's the whole point of asylum, right? Is that we're giving people a chance to live because there's a very strong possibility that in their home country, they will not be able to.
Right.
Are there any other thoughts that you'd like to share before we end this? Or
Sure. I mean, the fact that there needs to be a resettlement program for Afghanistan, or some kind of program within the United States that would allow large numbers of Afghanistans to come in. President Biden, I think a few days ago, said in a statement that he doesn't have the power. That's not true. He does have the power. And we've done it before in the past. In Vietnam in 1975, a few 100,000 refugees were brought in and paroled into Guam and then brought into Florida and a few other places. So, and then again, I think in Iraq in 1994, or I can't remember the exact year, but it's happened before. It's been done. And so to say that they don't have the power to do it, they do have the power to do it. And so that's why I think it's so important for us here in the United States to actually pressure and contact our Congress people and contact our representatives and get them to act on this, because this is a situation that the United States needs to put more of its efforts on.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing that up. That's the other thing. You can reach out to your congressmen, congresswomen, to your senators, and you can ask them to push for something. Like, we have to ask our representatives, we have to ask the people in power to do something. And if we don't ask, we're not going to get them to do things, right? So that's very, very important that we participate in that regard.
And this is just my final thought. I cannot help but wonder, right? And I haven't seen this being addressed in news outlets. The current situation, especially when you put into the context of the pandemic that's going on.
Yeah.
Coronavirus is still a thing, right? And these are people that are being dapped smack in like airplanes with no protective gears, nothing. So I wonder what could happen from it. And it's not a question that I need answers to. It's just, something that came into my mind, and I'm like, and it
it's almost become
ponder on.
Right? It's almost become a secondary thing because the priority is get people out, just get people out. Well, we have to see how things develop. I mean, it's not it's far from ideal, right? This is like, we have this pandemic, we have these people stuck, and we need to just get them out. So I think over the next few weeks, it's going to be a critical time. We're going to see a lot of developments take place. So what I would say to people is, this is the information that we currently have for you about your options, the situation, especially in regards to immigration. We will provide information about the resources that we talked about, and just a highlight of this on our website. So you can go to our website at www.kaliqlaw.com to get this information. And do stay tuned to further updates. And you can always reach out to immigration attorneys like Daven or myself to find out about your immigration options. It is, I think, definitely worthwhile if you are able to and eligible to start a petition for a family member who is in Afghanistan, even if it may take a while, and if you're eligible for asylum, to pursue that. I think we're almost reaching our time. Any final thoughts, Daven?
No, I think I just summarized what I said earlier. No, but thank you for having me, Sumaya. I mean, if we want, we could take, if there are questions, we could answer any comments or questions. I don't know if there are.
A few minutes of questions if anybody has questions.
Princess Teflon. Okay, maybe we can wrap up. Sumaya, do you have any concluding thoughts?
I just like to say, well, thank you everybody for joining. And if you know somebody who could benefit from this information, please share it with them. And look, the situation is a little bit dire right now, but there are people looking to assist. There are efforts being made to figure out the situation and get people out of Afghanistan. And there are immigration applications. I mean, I saw somebody's comment and I got distracted. And there are immigration options available for people. I do highly recommend, please do reach out to an immigration attorney just to see if there are any options available to you. And please reach out to your congressmen and local representatives to push the government to come up with something, to help these people. Because we need to hold the government accountable. We did spend 20 years in there, paid by our tax money, right? So I think it is something that we have to have the government be accountable for to help these people. And I think these are my final thoughts. Well, thank you, Daven, so much for joining me today to have this discussion. And for those of you who joined us, thank you for listening in. And hopefully we will be coming back in the future with more helpful information. All right. Thank you and have a good
Thanks for having me, Sumaya.
Take care. Bye-bye.